Hello and welcome to the Greek version of Acts 9, 1 through 9, I think it is today. We begin on week 18 of our pilgrimage through the Greek of Acts. And so this is Paul's conversion, although as I said in the podcast, he's not converting from one religion to another. That would be anachronistic. Judaism and Christianity remained one and the same for decades after this. The earliest Christians saw themselves as true Judaism or true Israelite religion. They saw themselves in complete continuity with the Old Testament, and they saw other forms of Judaism as the ones that were not the true Judaism. So they were, as I often say, they were far more Christian Jews than they were Jewish Christians in their way of thinking of it. So Paul is converting from Phariseeism to the Jesus movement. In fact, I even hesitate to call it Christianity at this point. It's not a separate religion. And there are Pharisees, as I say in the podcast, there are Pharisees who believed in Jesus as well. So even others did not even see Phariseeism as contradictory with the Jesus movement. Now, Paul does call himself, he says, I'm a Pharisee in Acts 23, but I think he's just buttering up the Pharisees in the crowd. He divides the house. I'm only in trouble because I believe in the resurrection, and then the Pharisees say, yeah, maybe he's seen something, and the Sadducees say, oh, there's no resurrection. All right, they fight each other. I love that chapter. Anyway, we'll get there, Lord willing. So chapter 9, verse 1. But the Saul, you've heard of Saul, various Sauls. This is the Saul. But the Saul, by the way, I've wondered, just to give you something different from the podcast, I've wondered what Jewish parents named their son Saul. I mean, Saul's not a particularly great character in the Old Testament. He kind of wonders whether when Paul follows the wrong path to begin with, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. I mean, what parent names himself Saul? This guy's not a model in the Old Testament. Anyway, but Saul, still breathing, that's a present participle, threat and murderous threat. Maybe this is a hendiadys, where these two kind of a threat of murder or something like that. Paul doesn't carry through with it, as I say in the podcast. As far as we know, Paul never put anybody to death. Towards the disciples of the Lord, the followers of the law, the apprentices of the Lord. Coming to the high priest, verse 2, he asked from the high priest, for letters, for epistles. This is the aorist of aiteo. Sigma alpha tells me it's aorist. The alpha augments to an eta, and then the iota hangs on for dear life. Okay, aorist middle, indicative, third singular. Amen u eta. He asked from him letters into Damascus to the synagogues. As I say in the podcast, this is curious. The high priest, the Sanhedrin has no jurisdiction over Damascus. That's way out of Israel. Herod Antipas, I think, was still ruling Damascus at this time. The synagogues, at most, it's kind of like nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more. But there's no political authority to do this here. Damascus, as I say in the podcast, is a curious. Why would Christians go there? Why would Paul go there? It's fodder for novel writing, shall we say. I mentioned the Essenes and the Dead Sea Scrolls, and there being a Covenant of Damascus document in the Essene text. Okay, in order that, this is a purpose clause, we expect a subjunctive, and there it is. We have found a subjunctive, heurisko, to find, eureka. So this is the subjunctive, and it's aorist subjunctive. It's lost the isko, and so it's aorist, third person singular, oase. In the subjunctive, you fry the vowel, so the epsilon is fried to an eta, and the iota hangs on for dear life. In order that I'm sorry, actually, I messed up. I was just testing you, as I tell my classes. Hapos goes with agage, the Popeye verb. Remember, this is the aorist of ago. But this is subjunctive. I mean, I parsed it right, but it goes with it on. If he should find some. So in order that, if he should find some being of the way, both men and women, having been bound, he might lead, in order that he might lead. So this is aorist. Time is out the window with the aorist subjunctive, by the way. All that the aorist means is its simple action. Blah, in order that he might lead. Not in order that he might be leading, but in order that he might lead, period. Okay? So in order that he might lead, having been bound to Jerusalem, if, conditional clause, so this is a purpose clause, this introduces a purpose clause, a conditional clause. If he should find certain being of the way, both men and women, having been bound, he might lead them to Jerusalem. This is a perfect passive participle of, what is it, deomai? Okay, verse 3. Ento infinitive, that's a time game, a temporal game, present, while going. And while going, it came to pass him to be near to Damascus. Okay, infinitive, subject of infinitive is an accusative case. And immediately, a light, a phos, surrounded him. Opposite order of English. Psi is the key to hidden sigma. Sigma epsilon is a third person singular aorist active indicative ending. From the sky, from the heaven. Okay, and having fallen, this is the aorist, the irregular aorist, the second aorist of Pipto. And having fallen upon the ground, he heard a sound, or he heard a voice. This is the aorist of Akuo. He heard a voice saying, this is a participle. Active females carry Uzis, female participles. So it's feminine, it goes with phone. Present active, this is a present active participle. Accusative feminine, singular. He heard a voice saying to him, direct quote, Saul, Saul, why me are you persecuting? Question mark. Verse 5. And he said, who are you, Lord? And he, that is Jesus, responded, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. Talk about this, in the podcast in much more time. Verse 6, but arise and go into the city. So this is the second person singular aorist imperative, aorist past imperative, I guess it is. Remember, the second person singular imperative forms are lu-e, lu-u, lu-son, lu-sai, lu-theti. This is a mangled lu-theti. Okay? Rise, but rise and be risen and go into the city, and it will be spoken to you, whatever, hostis, the conditional relative pronoun, these two go together, it is necessary for you to do. Infinitive, present active infinitive. Okay, verse 7. And the men, the ones going with him, traveling with him, they stood speechless. This is the pluperfect of histemi. They had stood speechless. They hearing the sound, but beholding no one. So they're hearing a sound. Are they hearing the voice? Again, it's a little puzzling because when we get to chapter 22, he says they didn't hear the voice. Hard to know what's going on here. We'll think about this as maybe by the time we get to chapter 22, I'll have a better answer for this as to how this might fit together. Maybe Luke is intentionally mixing it up to show the way people give differing accounts on different occasions. I don't know. I'm puzzled by it. But anyway, this pluperfect. That pluperfect is past perfect. The epsilon iota is a sign of the pluperfect here, and of course it's kind of augmented here. And that kappa, it's a perfect form. It's the past perfect form, active, so it has a kappa. Okay, and our last verses for today. And Saul was raised because he was having trouble getting up himself. Aorist passive of agero, from the ground, and having opened the eyes, this is a perfect participle, perfect passive participle of anoigo, to open. The fact that the ending is shoved right on the stem tells me it's perfect middle or passive. Men are passive participles. Oigo, interesting here, in oigo, the omicron lengthens, augments to an omega, and then the iota hangs on for dear life. But it decided to add an epsilon as well. Who knew? Just for the fun of it. Having opened his eyes, he was seeing nothing. imperfect of blepo. And hand leading, kairos, care is hand, and ago is lead. So, and hand leading him, which suggests that they weren't on horses or donkeys, that they were doing the walk thing. They entered into Damascus. Agag, again, the aorist of ago. Verse 9, and he was 3 days not seen, and he did not eat, and he did not drink. So he was, this is the imperfect of Amy, for 3 days. This is the accusative of the extent of time. Present participle, not seeing. These are both second aorist. F again is the aorist of estheo. It's irregular, you just have to memorize it. And epien is the aorist of pino. Just have to memorize it. Loses its nu in the aorist. Okay, this has been a walk through the Greek of these verses. See the podcast for much pontificating today. I got a little carried away, I'm afraid. Please forgive me. Okay, we will see you tomorrow, Lord willing.